Oregon, his state, is impacted significantly by this program. It is a significant issue to the school kids of Oregon, and Mr. Walden of Oregon is someone who has talked about this for many years and knows the significance and the importance of this particular issue. So I gladly yield to the gentleman from Oregon to explain his take on this secure schools issue.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Utah, chairman of the Forestry Subcommittee, a subcommittee that a number of years ago I had the great privilege and honor to chair when we passed legislation, as we're going to do in this House once again, to not only America's great forests healthy, but also then to stop the devastation that we heard from the gentleman from California. We have so much work to do to continue the legacy of real environmentalism, which is healthy forests and healthy communities. When President Theodore Roosevelt created the Great Forest Reserves back in 1905, thereabouts, he said they have to be in partnership with the communities, and the communities have to be supportive of this. And the great purpose of this creation of forest reserves, in a speech he gave in your home state, as a matter of fact, in Utah, I believe, was wood for wood making, for home building, water for agriculture, which means the preservation of healthy forests. In the real term, preservation, which is what I want. Not what we're seeing in Yosemite National Park and the surrounding areas, what was it, 400 square miles of devastation. Not what we saw in Oregon this summer, where the smoke was so thick in the Rogue Valley that they had to cancel performances at the Shakespeare Theater. The restaurants literally shut down. The people had to wear masks. I called into the call center of one of the phone companies, and the attendant there said to me, he said, "It's smoky in here inside the building." This is not what we want out of our forests. It's not what our taxpayers want. It's not what the school children want, because, you see, we've lost the jobs. We've lost the revenue from the jobs. We've got sheriffs in counties in my district that now have maybe one deputy. We had situations of violence, 9/11 calls. A woman was being attacked and basically told by the 9/11 folks, "We don't have anybody to send. Can you tell him to go away?" You can't make this stuff up. I thank Chairman Hastings, Chairman Bishop, others for bringing this bill forward. Let me tell you what it means in a state like mine. In 2012, the Oregon Department of Forestry, in collaboration with other state and federal agencies, issued a report to Oregon Governor John Kitzhaber, stating that over the 20-year period from 1980 to 2000, wildfires in eastern Oregon burned approximately 553,000 acres, with an average fire size of 26,000 acres. Over the last 10 years, in the same area, it's burned 1 million acres, averaging 93,000 acres in size. That means wildfires have tripled in size in the last 30 years. Not all of those are in forests. Some of them are grasslands. But the point is, it's out of control, and it's very, very deadly and expensive, and it's unacceptable. The Oregon Forest Resources Institute reported that since 1990, the timber harvest from federal forest lands in the great state of Oregon have dropped by more than 90%. 90% reduction since 1990 in harvest of timber off federal lands. In fact, 60% of Oregon's forest land is owned, controlled, but not really managed by the federal government. It now contributes less than 12% of the state's total timber harvest. 60% owned controlled by the federal government, 12% of timber harvest. And what does that mean for timber-dependent communities? Counties that are have like 50, 60, 70% federal ownership. My friend who taught school knows you don't have a tax base. And now you don't have jobs because now you're not doing harvest. You can't turn and entice some big company to come in. They don't. This is a forested rural area, long way from freeways in most cases, but not all. And so what does that mean? 9 of the 20 counties I represent face double-digit unemployment today. 9 of 20. 16 of the 20 counties I represent have more than 14% of their populations living in poverty. America, 14%. In 16 of the 20 counties. Here's a chart that shows what's happening. It shows mill closures in Oregon over the last 30 years. We've lost 3/4 of our mills and 30,000 mill jobs. And just recently, we lost another one in Josephine County. The Rough and Ready mill closed after nearly 100 years. The owners were ready to invest $2 million in upgrades. And they said, we can't count on a timber supply off the federal ground that surrounds them. There went 87 jobs. I want to show you another picture. I've used it before over the years. It's indicative of what happens in a fire. This is Caleb and Ashley after the Egley fire, which burned 140,000 acres in Harney County, 2007. It just shows the devastation, these young children out there. And what does it mean for our kids? The chairman asked about that. The Oregon Department of Education says 60% of the school children in the county where this fire occurred are eligible for free and reduced lunch. There's poverty all over the West, and there's a way to end that and produce jobs and revenue and have healthy forests rather than what we see today. Chairman's bill would require foresters to look at sustainable yield. A forest could produce and then only seek to harvest half of that, of the sustainable yield, and only on land that's suitable for timber harvest. It says if you're going to appeal a plan, you had to at least be involved in the process. We put that in the Healthy Forest Restoration Act that passed this body overwhelmingly, and I think passed the Senate. Huge support signed by then President Bush into law. It's had great effect, but limited in terms of what we need to do, but it had that provision in there. It strikes a balance. You need to participate in the process in order to have a right to appeal. It includes a one-year bridge payment. This gets to your schools issue for the counties who currently have lost or will lose their funding for emergency services, for roads, and for schools in the secure rural school side. This is a bridge. This is a bridge to put people back to work in the woods when coupled with active management. This is balance. This is balance. Now, the bill also has an Oregon-specific provision. Not everything I'd necessarily do if I could write it on my own, but you know what? You don't get that process here. We put together a good plan with Representatives DeFazio and Schrader. We've worked through our differences. We forged a balanced plan that would create thousands of new jobs, create or save up to 3,000 jobs in Oregon in these very unique lands called the O&C lands. It ensures the health of these lands for future generations. It provides long-term management and certainty of funding for our local services and schools and roads and law enforcement that lie within these counties. According to Governor Kitzhaber's O&C lands report, it would generate $120 million per year in county revenue. We don't come back here to the federal taxpayer and say, give us another check, give us another handout. We say, let us manage our own lands and do it under Oregon State Forest Practices Act, which is one of the leading environmental laws in the country for balance, for sustainable forest health and management. Do it under that, and we'll create the jobs and save them. We'll create the revenue for our schools. And let me tell you about the protections that you'll get. It provides activities near streams, lakes, and wetlands must include water quality protection, something we all agree on. Wildlife trees and down logs have to be left in most large clear-cut areas. Clear-cut sizes are limited to 120 acres. Now, some will say, oh, my gosh, 120 acres. Let me tell you that the Douglas Complex fire that burned this summer burned 48,000 acres. If there isn't a more destructive clear-cut than that, I don't know what it is. And you know what? After it burns, there's no requirement they go in and replant. If you harvest 120 acres, you're required to go in and replant, and those trees have to survive. And you go in right away. Let me show you what happens after a fire to the environment. There's no streams back here. Fire knows no bounds. Our legislation says you can't harvest near that, near a stream. You have to have setbacks. We believe in the environment. This is what you get when you don't manage. You see, lack of action has an impact in a dynamic forest environment. Doing nothing doesn't mean the forest gets better. It means it gets overcrowded, overstocked, and when you get fire, and we'll always have it, it just won't burn naturally anymore. It'll blow up like my friend and colleague from California's experienced in the Yosemite fire. And like we've experienced all over the West this summer, and will every summer thereafter. The Forest Service now spends more fighting fire than anything else. Yeah, it changed the name of the U.S. Fire Service. We got to get back to managing these lands, and this legislation does that. I thank the committee for its incredible work. I thank you for bringing this to the floor. I look forward to voting for it when it comes to the floor. And together, we'll get back to proper, thoughtful, constructive management of our federal forests. We'll take care of that trust the people put in us to take care of their lands. And we'll take care of the people as well. And I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for his comments here. We have heard now from 3 members from the West Coast.